The next morning began like every other for Emma Rose. She rose before sunrise, brewed her usual cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and sat for a few quiet minutes at the edge of her bed, watching the wind toy with the curtain by the window. The harbor outside was calm, the fishing boats still docked in early silence, and the only sound was the occasional call of a distant gull. Emma looked around her small, neat apartment, its walls decorated with second-hand paintings and pressed flowers, and felt that small sense of gratitude she always tried to carry with her. It was going to be a good day, she told herself. She had done something kind. Something right. By the time she arrived at the pharmacy, the hum of fluorescent lights had already filled the air, mingling with the antiseptic scent of freshly mopped floors. The usual morning bustle was underway, elderly customers refilling prescriptions, a mother asking about cold remedies, the beep of barcodes echoing like clockwork. Emma stepped behind the register, greeting the first few customers with her familiar gentle nod and soft-spoken voice. At 8:43 a.m., her name came over the intercom. A crisp, curt summons to the back office. She walked the narrow hallway past shelves of overstocked vitamin jars and unopened flu kits, her shoes quiet against the linoleum. The door at the end stood half open. Karen Douglas, the store manager, sat behind the desk, already watching the screen of her security monitor. She didn't look up when Emma entered. Karen was known for her efficiency, her immaculate appearance, her rigid rules, her ability to make numbers line up like soldiers. Her office reflected the same, one plant that never seemed to grow, one photo of a prize-winning poodle, and one constant scent of lemon disinfectant. She gestured toward the seat across from her. Emma sat, folding her hands in her lap. Karen clicked a few keys. A grainy video replayed in a silent loop, the evening before, the dim frame capturing Emma behind the counter, her slender fingers slipping a $10 bill into the register, scanning the medication, handing it across the counter to an elderly man who looked barely strong enough to stand. Henry Blake. Karen paused the footage. "It's clear," she said, her voice neutral. "You bypassed our transaction protocol. Logged the purchase under your name. This qualifies as a financial discrepancy and unauthorized discounting." Emma didn't speak. She met Karen's eyes, calm, composed, unmoved. Karen continued. "I understand your intentions. But we are not a charity. This store operates under tight margins. Any deviation from policy is a liability." Emma gave a single nod. No defense. No justification. Karen reached for the folder on her desk, opened it, and pulled out a pre-filled form. Termination of employment. The line for employee signature left blank, waiting. "I'm afraid we have no choice," she said. "Your shift ends now." Emma signed. One smooth motion of the pen. She stood, nodded again, and left the office as quietly as she had entered. Back at her station, she packed her few belongings into a small paper bag, a thermos with worn paint around the rim, a pocket-sized planner, a tiny potted succulent that had somehow survived 3 winters on the counter. No one around her looked up. Her co-workers kept their heads down, their eyes on receipts and pill bottles. The fear of Karen's disapproval ran deeper than any bond of camaraderie. Even the part-time assistant pharmacist, who once shared his lunch with Emma during a power outage, pretended to be too busy checking inventory to notice her departure. Emma walked past the shelves where she'd helped countless customers find the right medication, past the greeting cards she restocked every Thursday, past the automatic doors that whispered open and let her back into the morning chill. The sky outside was clouded now, soft gray, as if mirroring her exit. A light breeze carried the scent of salt from the nearby docks. She tightened her coat and began the walk home, her step steady, her face unreadable. She didn't text anyone. Didn't call her parents. She simply walked with her thoughts, the streets familiar beneath her boots. The brick walls of Fairmont's buildings passed beside her like silent sentinels, each one holding a memory, the bakery where she once shared a lemon scone with her high school best friend. The bookstore where she bought used cookbooks to plan meals for her imagined cafe, the community hall where she spent one Christmas serving soup to the town's elderly, quietly, without ceremony. Inside her chest, a small weight had settled. Not regret. Not shame. Something deeper. Something heavier and still. But she knew she had made the right choice. She had done something that mattered. And yet, there was no reward for it. No gratitude. No recognition. Just a closed door and silence. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands were stiff with cold. She let herself in, set the paper bag on the kitchen table, and filled her kettle with water. She moved through her space like someone visiting an old memory. The wallpaper was peeling in one corner. The window leaked during storms. The fridge hummed with a rhythm all its own. She poured herself a glass of water and sat by the window, the same spot she always sat when life felt too loud or too quiet. Outside, a seagull perched on a lamppost, its feathers ruffled against the wind. Emma watched it. She had lost her job. But not her dignity. That, no one could take. She didn't know what would come next. But for now, she reached into her bag, pulled out her notebook, and turned to a page labeled Cafe Budget, Dream Draft. She began to revise the numbers again. Less income now, maybe a few months' delay. But the dream was still there. It always would be. In the hours that followed Emma's quiet walk home, life in Fairmont moved forward as if nothing had changed. The streets filled with school buses and delivery trucks. The corner bakery turned on its warm yellow lights, and the scent of cinnamon rolls drifted down Main Street. But under the surface, something small had big asterisk in to stir. Lucas Benton was 15 years old and tall for his age, with a mop of dark hair that always fell into his eyes. He had been sitting in the corner aisle of Silver Heart the night before, flipping through a comic book while waiting for his mother, who was picking up medicine for his grandfather. Lucas was the sort who noticed things, the kind of teenager who saw too much and spoke too little. He had seen the old man approach the counter. Seen the tremble in his hand as he reached for his wallet. Seen Emma lean forward, her voice low and her eyes soft. He'd watched the exchange carefully, the way you watch a candle in a dark room. He didn't understand all of it in the moment, but he knew what he saw. Kindness. No announcement. No expectation. Just a quiet decision to make someone else's day a little less hard. And so, that afternoon, when his mother stepped out for a call, Lucas borrowed her laptop. He opened a blank post on the website she managed, the Fairmont Daily Echo, a local news blog with a modest following. He'd helped her before with uploading school event photos, formatting local announcements. She trusted him. So he typed. The post was simple. Just a few paragraphs. No names. Just a story about a girl behind the counter of a pharmacy, and a man who couldn't afford his medicine, and how, instead of turning him away, she paid for it herself. And how, the next day, she was fired. Lucas stared at the screen for a moment after finishing. Then, with the impulsiveness only teenagers understand, he clicked publish. The post went live at 5:27 p.m. By 6 o'clock, it had been shared 47 times. By 6:40, the comments section had turned into a stream of angry faces and broken hearts. Unbelievable. That's what you fire someone for? My grandmother knew Emma. Said she was the sweetest soul. This is disgusting. I saw her help an old woman carry groceries once when the cart broke. She's pure gold. She's the kind of person we need in this town. The post lit a spark. The spark lit a fire. Across town, in the warmth of a modest brick house lined with family photos and American flags, Mayor Jonathan Mills sat down for dinner with his wife when his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, but the name on the screen, his assistant's, gave him pause. Sir, the assistant said, his voice urgent but restrained, you need to see this post. It's everywhere. About a girl from Silver Heart. Emma Rose. The name stopped him. The mayor's brow furrowed. He remembered Emma. She had volunteered at the community food drive last winter. Helped set up tables, passed out cans to families, and stayed after to sweep the floor. Never asked for recognition. just did the work, then disappeared back into her quiet life. Jonathan Mills was a veteran himself. 20 years in the Air Force before returning to Fairmont. He had known men like Henry Blake. Had served with them. Had buried some. The image of Henry standing in that pharmacy, thin and cold and unable to pay for his medicine, shook something loose in the mayor's chest. He called his driver. By 7:20 p.m., the Blacktown SUV was rolling down Main Street toward Silverheart Pharmacy. Back online, the Post had reached over 1,000 shares. Local businesses began weighing in. The owner of the Harbor Cafe offered Emma a job. The librarian posted a memory of Emma tutoring children during the summer reading program. A retired teacher shared how Emma once fixed her walker in the middle of the street when one of its wheels jammed. Each story stacked like bricks, building a picture no pink slip could undo. But inside her apartment, Emma knew none of it. She was sitting cross-legged on her living room floor, sorting through recipe cards. Lentil soup. Cornbread. Oatmeal raisin cookies. She was circling ideas for meals that could be made in bulk. Meals that could feed people who didn't have enough. She didn't check her phone. Didn't open her laptop. The outside world could wait. Elsewhere, things were moving quickly. At the pharmacy, the atmosphere had changed. Karen Douglas, still unaware of the online storm, paced the back office. She noticed the shift, though, co-workers whispering near the stockroom, customers unusually cold at checkout. When the black SUV pulled up in front of the store, its windows gleaming under the streetlights, she froze. City officials stepped out first. The mayor followed. He wore no tie. Just a windbreaker, slacks, and the unmistakable gravity of a man on a mission. Karen's instinct was to greet him, to regain control. She stepped forward with a half-smile, arms slightly outstretched. But the mayor didn't take her hand. Instead, he asked one question. "Is it true?" She tried to frame a defense. She used words like policy, protocol, company rules. But the mayor held up one hand. "We'll verify the facts," he said. "But if what I've read is true, this young woman deserves far more than you gave her." By the time the reporters arrived, cameras flashing in the fading light, the story had already taken root in the town's collective heart. It wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about what kind of community Fairmont wanted to be. The town was watching. And change had just begun in. Emma hadn't turned on her phone all evening. She liked the quiet too much. In the hush of her apartment, with a tea towel over her lap and a second-hand recipe book open beside her, she had spent the better part of an hour writing out ideas for the cafe that still lived in her heart. She didn't yet know how she would pay for it, or where it would be. But her notebook had pages labeled Weekly Meal Schedule, Volunteer Shifts, and Community Board. The final page was blank, waiting for something she hadn't yet figured out. Outside, Fairmont had changed. While Emma sat in stillness, the town had found its voice. A crowd had gathered outside Silverheart Pharmacy. Not large, not angry, just present. People from all corners of the town. A retired Navy cook stood next to a school janitor. A mother held her toddler against her chest. A man in a wheelchair passed out small candles. The pharmacy's windows glowed against the dusk, but behind them, Karen Douglas paced in confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. The black SUV was parked right at the curb, its lights off but its symbolism impossible to miss. The town's emblem, a lighthouse with rays spreading across an ocean, was stamped clearly on its door. Mayor Jonathan Mills stood beside it, flanked by city officials and 2 members of the local press, their notepads ready. One cameraman from the regional station out of Tillamook was setting up quietly across the street, his lens pointed directly at the store. Inside Silverheart, Karen tried to regain composure. She called the district office. No one picked up. She opened her drawer, pulled out a printed copy of the employee handbook, and flipped to the section on unauthorized transactions. But each word she read seemed thinner, less defensible, in the face of what she now understood to be coming. Outside, the mayor took one step toward the doors. He paused, took a breath, and pushed through the glass entry with the kind of quiet authority only a former military officer could command. The chime overhead rang once. Sharp. Unmistakable. Every conversation in the store stopped. The pharmacy tech froze mid-scan. A customer holding a bag of cough drops lowered her hand. Karen emerged from the back office, her smile fixed in place, her fingers gripping the sides of her blazer. "Mayor Mills," she began, "I didn't expect." He raised one hand gently. Not unkind, but firm. "I read the article," he said, his voice low but carrying across the aisles. "We've confirmed the employee's name. Emma Rose. I believe she worked here until this morning." Karen nodded, mouth dry. "She violated our financial procedures," she said. "It was not a personal judgment. It was policy." A beat passed. The mayor looked around. His eyes landed on a young girl in a school uniform, standing beside her father in line. Then an elderly man in a wool coat who had taken off his cap in quiet respect. Every eye in the store was now on them. "Do you know who she helped?" the mayor asked. Karen blinked. "A man. I don't recall his name." "Henry Blake," the mayor said. "A decorated Marine. My friend. A man who's lived in this town longer than you have. He lost his wife. Lost his son. Walks with pain in his legs, barely eats some weeks, and still stands when he hears the national anthem." Karen's hands fell to her sides. "She paid for his medication," the mayor continued. "And you fired her." "It wasn't personal," Karen repeated. "It was." "Sometimes," the mayor interrupted, "doing the right thing doesn't fit neatly inside a company policy." A silence swept the store. The kind of silence that weighs more than any argument. A silence where every customer, every clerk, every passerby, heard something unspoken but deeply understood. From his coat pocket, Mayor Mills drew a thin folder. Inside was a formal letter, signed earlier that evening. He placed it on the counter, facing Karen. "This is a certificate of civic merit," he said. "It's being awarded to Emma Rose for an act of compassion and bravery in service to her community. She is to be recognized by the city council this Thursday. You are invited to attend, of course." Karen looked down at the paper. Its words were simple. Direct. Unshakable. "There's more," the mayor added. "I have a new position opening in my office, community outreach. We need someone with vision. With compassion. Someone who knows this town's people not by file, but by heart." He looked around again. Someone like her. No one clapped. No one cheered. But the stillness in the air changed. It softened. Deepened. A murmur of approval flickered across the crowd. Karen said nothing. She stepped back, her posture folding inward. In that moment, her authority collapsed, not from force, but from truth. The mayor turned, stepped outside, and rejoined his team. A quiet nod, a glance toward the small crowd. Then the SUV pulled away. Inside her apartment, Emma stood in the kitchen, drying her mug. Her phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up with a dozen unread messages. But she didn't check. Not yet. She looked down at her hands. They still trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the feeling that something had shifted. As if the wind had changed direction. She poured herself another cup of water. Sat down at her desk. And kept writing. The ceremony took place in Fairmont's Old Town Hall, a modest brick building with a worn American flag fluttering above the doorway and folding chairs lined neatly across the wooden floor. The evening air carried the scent of pine and ocean salt, and inside, the lights glowed warmer than usual. Emma arrived quietly, wearing her only formal dress, navy blue, simple, with a cardigan her mother once mended by hand. Her hair was pinned back in a loose braid, her shoes modest. She hadn't expected a crowd. She hadn't expected anything, really. But the seats were full. Not just full, standing room only. She saw familiar faces, the librarian who used to wave from across the street, the baker who once gave her a free slice of pie after her father passed, and even the children from the summer reading program, now a little older, holding handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Miss Emma." In the front row, Henry Blake sat with his cane across his lap, wearing a clean shirt and a Marine Corps cap that looked like it had been ironed just that morning. His eyes glistened, and he nodded once as Emma entered. Next to him sat Lucas Benton, looking sheepish in a too-big blazer, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The mayor stepped to the podium. No microphone was needed. The room had the hush of reverence. "We gather tonight," he began, "not just to honor a good deed, but to remind ourselves of what this town was always meant to be." He spoke about Emma's actions, how she helped not for credit, not for applause, but because her heart told her someone needed help. He spoke about Henry Blake, his service, his grief, his silence, and how one moment of kindness had changed more than just the balance of a pharmacy register. Then he held up the plaque. It was modest. A wooden base, a brass plate engraved with her name, and a short inscription, "For compassion in action, Emma Rose, Fairmont, or." But it was what came next that silenced the room. The mayor reached into a velvet box and withdrew a coin. Not just any coin, a military challenge coin, issued by the Department of Veterans Affairs, etched with the American flag on one side and the phrase "service beyond duty" on the other. He didn't explain where he got it. He didn't need to. Instead, he stepped down, walked to Emma, and pressed it into her hand. From the back of the room, someone began to clap. Slowly, awkwardly at first. Then others joined. Then all. The sound rose and filled the hall, not loud, but whole. Karen Douglas was there. She stood near the exit, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her mouth drawn. But she didn't speak. She couldn't. The sound of gratitude was louder than anything she might have said. After the event, Emma stepped out into the night, the cold air kissing her cheeks. People approached her, not with fanfare, but with quiet thanks. A grocery clerk offered to help stock her shelves when her cafe opened. A retired carpenter said he could help with permits. A teenager handed her a sketch of a building with big front windows and the words "Red Bench Cafe" above the door. That night, when she returned home, Emma didn't turn on the lights right away. She stood at her window, looking out at the harbor, and felt, for the first time in a long while, that something had changed. Not in the world. In her. 2 months later, Red Bench Cafe opened its doors. It sat just off Main Street, near the library, in what used to be a hardware store. The walls were painted soft yellow. A red bench stood just outside the entrance, newly built but with an old soul. Henry had helped stain it. Lucas planted flower pots on either side. Inside, the tables were simple, the menu handwritten. There were no prices, only suggested donations. Veterans ate free. Children ate free. Anyone could leave $1, or a note, or a smile. And they came. First in small numbers, then more. Word spread, not just across Fairmont, but to nearby towns. Students came to volunteer. Retirees came to bake. Even tourists, hearing whispers of a place where people still believed in quiet kindness, found their way in. Emma never made much money. But she never needed to. What she built wasn't a business. It was a sanctuary. One day, a stranger entered, a man in a pressed suit with military posture. He left behind no name, only a folded letter and a photograph of a young Marine beside a desert tent. The note read, "My father told me about you. Thank you for giving him back his dignity." Emma framed it. It hung beside the cash box, between a pressed daisy and a faded receipt from Silver Heart, the last item she ever rang up. Sometimes, people still asked her why she did it, why she gave up a steady job, why she never moved away, why she kept the cafe open even when donations ran low. She would smile and pour another cup of coffee. Some things didn't need explaining. Kindness, she believed, was its own reward.